Why is it somebody who makes high income in excess of $500,000 a year in reportable income, why is it that they will do anything to avoid paying taxes to the federal government? Legally, of course. Why is it that investors, doctors, lawyers, engineers, farmers, ranchers, IT tech experts, stock traders, they all have one major common problem? They look at their income, they figure out what tax bracket they're in, and they panic. And they think to themselves, I don't want to pay the taxes that I owe. Now let's face it, if you have rules of the game, rules of engagement that the Internal Revenue Service has put out, that Congress has put out and says you can make a lot of money, and these are the ways that you can keep more of your money by certain asset investing, certain types of investments, certain tax strategies. Well, most people who are smart, who are high income earners, are going to say, well, I'm going to try to use the tools that are available to reduce my taxes. But these people, those of us or anybody that makes high income, they're thinking, man, I don't want to cheat the system. I don't want to lose my money through taxes. I see what the government does, but I see all the money being stolen and funneled out. What do I invest in that's going to allow me to save my taxes, put that money to work, and let me grow my net worth and grow my income? See, I'm not talking to the people below $500,000 because they don't have the problem. They get a lot of tax deductions we don't get in the higher income bracket. When you get high income bracket, to be honest, 500,000 a year is not that much money in the real world. The average 1% net worth in the United States now is $13.7 million. That person probably makes north of $1 million to $2 million a year in income. So if that's true, and we have this really large albatross around our neck, which is the harder I work, the more I owe to the government. The more I owe to the government and I see what they do with it, the more it makes me sick that I'm working probably until the middle of May or early June before I actually work for money I get to keep. How do I solve that problem? How do I invest in a way that allows me to save my taxes and put it to work successfully? Well, see, that's where the difficulty comes. All right. All the financial professionals out there, all the CPAs, all the promoters, the deal finders, the investment strategists, everyone who's looking at this high income earner in the US and saying, I've got to figure out a mousetrap to convince that so called high income earner to invest in the product that I've created, because that fear of paying taxes is so great, they'll almost cut off their left foot so they don't have to pay taxes. They'll almost chop their finger off so they don't have to pay taxes. They'll do anything to avoid paying their taxes as long as it follows the rules that the IRS and Congress has put in front of them. So if that's true, it doesn't take a lot to get someone to be encouraged to make investment, really in investments that probably don't economically work. Let me put it to you this way. Today, if I'm in the bracket of making north of 500,000 a year in income, I have one major strategy I have to work on every day of the week, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I have to figure out how I can successfully and legally find investments that are good investments with the asset itself having value, that also is coupled with the highest and greatest advantage from a tax position. That's how I'm going to make more income and retain it. That's how I'm going to build up assets that allow me to build my net worth. And if I can do it in a way that I can repeat it year after year, guess what? I will accumulate and build my net worth and my income faster, with less pressure, more retention of income, and do it in a way that leaves me with all kinds of growth in assets because I've made smart investments. So what can I do today? What kind of investments can I make that allow me to do exactly what I described, pay less in tax and have a successful investment? Well, real estate's a great one. Go buy real estate, you get cost segregation, you get depreciation, you have all kinds of tax deductions, and that's great. And that's been a really big thing for the last 5 to 10 years. The problem is many people take that cost segregation and they chase it, and they don't think about the backside, which is, now that I bought that property and took all the tax write-offs, was it a good investment without the tax write-off? Or was it only a good investment because of the tax write-off? See, and I think that's the key. The key is I'm not going to avoid paying taxes and put myself into a swamp. I'm not going to avoid paying taxes so I end up in a boiling pot of oil. I would rather pay my taxes, as bad as the government uses my money, I'd rather pay my taxes and keeping the net income I have after taxes and make successful, wise investments. But that's not what the average investor does. Again, they'd rather cut their left foot off than pay federal income taxes. So now I've got real estate cost segregation. I've got all these other ancillary equipment leasing deals. I got a lot of different ways I can invest my money and different ways I can reduce my tax liability. But the one that's probably most prevalent, that's most in front of you, that has the highest deduction, and if it's done correctly, has the longest term cash flow, is going to be oil and gas working interest. It's going to be to participate in America's energy sector. It's going to say, I'm qualified, I'm sophisticated, I make enough income, I have a high enough net worth. I want to drill domestic wells for America, and I want to get tax write-offs, tax-free income, and I want a successful asset that can generate income 10, 20, 30 years down the road. Only one big problem. It has a very high barrier to entry. To successfully invest in oil and gas, to successfully keep your income and reduce your taxes and have long-term successful assets and investment that makes sense, it's an extremely high barrier to entry. Why is it such a high barrier to entry? Very few people understand or know how to get involved in oil and gas. They don't know who to invest with. They don't understand the industry. They don't understand how it works. They don't know how to access it. So because of that, there's a huge barrier in credibility. There's a huge barrier when it comes to educational intents and information. So today, if I'm in your shoes and I'm listening to this particular message and I say, I am that person, I have high income, I'm building my net worth, I want to invest rather than giving it to the government, I want to do it legally, I want to use the tools that are available, I got traditional real estate, I got other equipment leasing, I got other oil and gas working interest, I decide oil and gas working interest is what I want to do. Start your journey and figure out what successful high net worth investors have learned over the last 50 years. I have to figure out how to retain my income. And drilling domestic wells in this country since 1986 Tax Reform Act has provided I get somewhere between 75% and 100% of what I invest in domestic oil and gas wells as a tax deduction of my federal gross income every year I make the investment. It's a great industry. It's got a lot of rats, got a lot of bad actors in it. It's a difficult industry. But if you have the time, the patience, and if you have the savvy to take the time to learn about it, it's one of the greatest tax deductions you can find today in the United States.